Alright, so this is something I'm doing on a whim. Today, we're going to be ranking the main series Pokemon games. Now, usually I would stream this, but it's really late, and I just felt like doing it right this second. So, that's mostly what's going on here. Also, I don't know if I actually want chat to influence me on this first draft of the tier list, because they have a tendency to do that, so maybe we'll revisit the tier list on stream and then we'll see how my opinion changes. And that is one thing that's going on here as well, is that I want to make this tier list now, and then, like, you know, in later years, in the next decade, when I revisit these Pokemon games, I can think, okay, well, was that better or worse than I thought it would be? And I can just kind of revisit this tier list and make changes and whatever, so. Alright, that's it. So as far as the criteria goes, it's mostly just how good they are, and every Pokemon game is pretty good, I think. It's a very bold statement, I know. I just think that I've seen some people on Twitter where, like, they'll respond to someone else's tier list and they'll be like, how can you think, you know, Fire and Leaf Green are so high tier, they're literally garbage. And I'm just like, all the Pokemon games are all so similar. Like, how can you think one game is really good and one game is really bad when they're all so similar? Now, of course, I know it is all kind of relative. Like, maybe if all video games are on, you know, the spectrum, then maybe all the Pokemon games are in the A tier or something, I don't know. And then within that tier, there's, you know, the good ones and the bad ones anyway. But yeah, that was some background I wanted to give, is that I acknowledge that every Pokemon game is pretty good, but I'm still going to try and tier them anyway. So the criteria is just how good they are, and also I would say how likely I am to revisit them, because, you know, if you're going to make a tier list, then for Pokemon games or any kind of games, then I would think one of the main purposes of it is to kind of illustrate which games you're most likely to revisit, so I think that only makes sense. And on that note, I'm gonna put I'm gonna put red and yellow and blue in F tier. Now, hear me out. Remember, this is all relative, so like if I know ahead of time that these are my least favorite, then it only makes sense to put them in F tier. I think that only makes sense. Later on I might end up shuffling my tiers a little bit, but yeah. I just don't have any, or I have some nostalgia attached to the old games, but not a whole lot. Yellow was the first game I ever played, but I played it before I could even read, so my memories of Yellow are like getting lost in Rock Tunnel for days, and like getting frustrated that I couldn't evolve Pikachu, and for some reason I had like a Nidoqueen. But yeah, very spotty memories of the old game, so I don't have very much nostalgia attached to them, and in terms of revisiting them, I just think there's literally no reason to. They're not mechanically very fun, and they're slow. If you're playing on emulator, then I guess that helps, but yeah. So that's where I stand on red, yellow, and blue. I'll put them in order. And so in case it isn't clear already, I'm judging based on how much I personally enjoyed them. So yeah, I'm not trying to go for like an objective thing here, obviously. Next up we have, let's see, we got silver, gold, and crystal. So I actually didn't play these games when they first came out. My parents never bought them for me for some reason, so I ended up playing them on like friends' cartridges. And then a little bit later on, when I was maybe like 11 or 12, my mom finally ordered me a copy of Silver on eBay, but the battery was dead, so it couldn't save. Finally, eventually, I got a crystal cartridge, and that one saved properly, and then I was able to finally play the game properly and beat it. But by that point, I think, at the very least, Diamond and Pearl had come out. I don't know if Heart Gold and Soul Silver had come out yet. They might have, actually. In terms of just which one I'm most willing to return to, I think Crystal might actually get a knock here. I know that's weird, but like, for some reason, if you look at like the wild encounters for Crystal, like Silver and Gold just have like more interesting Pokemon you can find. It's really weird. I think you can get like Stantler and Nidorino and Nidorina like pretty early in the game. if I'm remembering right. I might not be. And for some reason, Mareep is just not in Crystal, which I appreciate, like, the nerve behind that decision. But, you know, what if I want to use Mareep? What then? But I would say that probably doesn't warrant putting an entire tier between them, so I think they're pretty good in C tier. If I'm forcing myself to use the whole spectrum, then maybe I'd put them in D tier for now. I would say I'm much more likely to revisit these games than these games. When I replayed Crystal most recently, I remember being impressed by how fleshed out Kanto was. I remembered it being kinda barren when I played it originally, but going back to it, I remember having a pretty good time in it. You can still clear it pretty quickly, but I mean, you don't want to spend too much time in there in the post-game. I'm kind of talking myself into putting them up back to C tier, so I might do that. I guess one knock against them is that they're really not very hard. The level curve is like all over the place, where there's like a big chunk of the game where you're just fighting Pokemon that are way weaker than you, then suddenly you get to Claire and it becomes challenging again. I think I'll keep them in C tier because they're the only games where you can actually visit another region after the main game and then like do those gyms and then you can fight Red. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good spot for them. Okay, now these are the big boys. Where'd they go? We have Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. So these are the games I played most growing up. By the time I got Ruby, I was able to read. So a lot of my memories with Pokemon are associated with Gens 3 and 4, but specifically 3. And I think in terms of which games I'm most likely to revisit, these are pretty damn high. Just because at this point I'm so used to the mechanics in Gen 3. Like it was right before they implemented the physical special split, and like playing so much XD in Coliseum, I've just gotten so used to how the mechanics work in those games. I would say they're probably more challenging than these 3 games. Not that that's really saying a whole lot, but I would say that gives them something over them. But yeah, I definitely have a lot of nostalgia associated with Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, which is why like I find myself liking basically everything about it. Like I like all the Gen 3 sprites. I like all the new cries for the Hoenn Pokemon. That's one thing I can talk about as well. All of the Hoenn Pokemon are really cool, I think. They introduced a lot of really good ones in Hoenn. All the starters are cool. Gardevoir, Aggron. There's a big list. The fossils are cool. Metagross and Salamence. Latios and Latias. And of course, Emerald had the cursed Battle Frontier, which, you know, in terms of which games I'm most likely to revisit, I guess the Battle Frontier would put Emerald pretty high up. However, once you complete the Battle Frontier for the first time, there is no reason to do it again. I think people overrate how enjoyable the Battle Frontier is. With the new games, people really want them to add a new Battle Frontier, and I'm like, dude, have you played the Battle Frontier in Emerald? I think people kind of have rose-tinted goggles for the Battle Frontier in Emerald. Because it's kind of a shit show, but it's still enjoyable, I guess, under the right circumstances. I don't know. But yeah, I left Emerald in S tier, and I left Ruby and Sapphire in A tier. I think that's pretty fair. I feel kind of weird separating them because, like, they are extremely similar, but once again, if I'm going to use the entire spectrum here, I think this makes sense. In fact, so this is one thing, is it's almost like opportunity cost of time. Like, why would I ever play Emerald, or why would I ever play Ruby and Sapphire if I can just play Emerald? But, so like in that case, maybe I'd put them all the way down here, but that doesn't seem fair, so I'll leave them in A tier. I think that's pretty fair. We're gonna have a similar situation with Diamond and Pearl, but we're not there yet. So first we have Fire Red and Leaf Green. We're still in Gen 3, so I have a lot of memories associated with Fire Red, Leaf Green. It was kind of the first time I really got to experience Kanto, because once again, when I played Yellow and Red, I couldn't read, so I never made it to the end of the game in Yellow, but in Leaf Green I did, finally. They're just really straightforward. When I think of, like, the classic Pokemon formula, these are the kind of games I think of, where, like, early on in the game, you have very few options for what you can use. You're kind of stuck using Rattata and Pidgey, the bugs, you know. It's not like the new games where basically immediately you get like access to the wild area where there's all sorts of shit you can catch. not that's a bad thing, but like I would say I associate the average Pokemon experience more with what's going on in these games. Also, they kind of get a nod because technically you can do some of the gyms out of order, but you know what? I think most people end up doing them in the same order anyway, so I don't know if I actually want to give them credit for that. It's like, yeah, you can go out of order, but like nobody actually ever does. So, what else can I say about Fire Leaf Green? I've heard at least one or two people say that they don't like the kind of the sound font they went for in these games. I can't really describe what it's like, but if you've heard the game's music, you know what I'm talking about. And maybe it's because of nostalgia, but I just have gotten used to it and I actually like it. And the champion theme in Fire Leaf Green goes so hard. I love it. That's another memory I have associated with it. They have a pretty good post game too. The Sephi Islands are certainly better than nothing. I also like that you can revisit the Pokemon League and fight Gary, or I guess Blue, and he has like a Heracross and a Tyranitar now. I think Fire Leaf Green were the first games to do that actually, where you could re-challenge the Pokemon League and they'd have new Pokemon. I'm kind of talking myself into putting them in A tier, I'm not gonna lie, but I don't know. Maybe I kind of want to leave them in B tier for now, because they are pretty easy, although I don't know how much I want to account for difficulty, because a lot of the Pokemon games just aren't that difficult, so yeah. Okay, we'll move on. So at this point we're past Gen 3. If they had Coliseum and XD on here, maybe I would put them on here. I don't know, maybe that's not a fair comparison though. I'd probably end up putting XD like up here and then Coliseum somewhere around here. But we can move on to Gen 4. We got Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. And I can already tell you there's going to be a difference between Platinum and Diamond Pearl. So I was saying earlier, a lot of my memories associated with Pokemon early on were in Gens 3 and 4. That was when I was like most into Pokemon. That was when my interest in Pokemon peaked. And so I have a lot of fun memories just looking at the promotional material for Diamond and Pearl because they weren't out yet. So we saw stuff for like Electivire and Weavile and Lucario, like all this stuff that led up to Gen 4. It really felt like, I felt like they were leading up to something really big. Like they were teased in a bunch of the spin-off games. It was just really cool. I remember thinking, oh, these games must be a really big deal. So, but otherwise, I don't know if this is the first thing I want to talk about, but yeah, they're very slow. The HP bars scroll very slowly. All the animations are slow. Everything about them is pretty slow. The surfing animation in Diamond and Pearl is like, not animation, but the surfing speed. It's like infamous for how slow it is. They sped it up a little bit in Platinum, but it's still not perfect. So, let's see, what else can I talk about? I would say, in terms of difficulty, yeah, I think that might be a significant factor here, because I think these games might be significantly harder than Gen 3. Although it's been a while since I've revisited Gen 4. For Diamond and Pearl, I think it's a little harder because... actually, never mind. I was having a conversation recently about how the AI in Diamond and Pearl specifically, apparently they're really bad, so they're probably not actually that hard. In Platinum, they fixed the AI, so it's better. Yeah, I guess Platinum's probably more likely to be the difficult one because they just have better Pokemon, generally speaking. Like, Flint can actually have like a decent team made out of fire Pokemon. So I have more to say, but for now, I'm going to put Platinum here, and I'm going to leave Diamond Pearl here. And like this, oof. Yeah, this feels weird. It feels weird leaving such a huge gap between them, but like literally, why would you ever play Diamond and Pearl when you could just play Platinum? It's like, I really feel like there's no reason to go back to them if Platinum exists. Platinum's just so much more fun because like they fixed a bunch of the learn sets for the Pokemon. So Pokemon that weren't as fun to use before are fun to use now, for lack of better words. Like Ponyta, they fixed Ponyta's learn set. They fixed Piplup. There's plenty of examples, and of course, they actually allowed you to use all the cool evolution Pokemon they introduced in Sinnoh. So like now you can actually use Weavile and Electivire and Gliscor in the main game in Platinum. So Platinum is just more fun. Like literally, I don't know how else to put it. Diamond and Pearl can stay down here, I think. In fact, I may even put them like down in E tier. Maybe I should get rid of this tier right here. Maybe I'll do like this. I think that's good for now. I guess I don't have anything else to say about Gen 4. They also have a Battle Frontier, but I have less experience with that one because I haven't beaten it. So I guess that gives Platinum some more replay value. Diamond and Pearl don't have the Battle Frontier. The post game is pretty good, and all of them. I think all 3 games have like the post game where you go to the battle area, but I think, yeah, they all have that. So I can't knock Diamond and Pearl for not having that. Okay, next we have Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Some people hold these games in very high regard, and I don't mean to say I don't know why, but I kind of get why. I can just kind of vibe with that idea because they're just very polished games. They look good, all the sprites are nice, the music's really good. They're really nice remakes of games that people really like. You can actually use the new evolutions, like you can actually use Tangrowth and Licky Licky as random examples, compared to Fireleaf Green where you can't actually use Crobat or Steelix in the main game. Heart Gold Soul Silver actually lets you use like the new evolutions they made, like Yanmega and plenty of other ones. I associate Johto with being really easy, but I think they address the difficulty in a meaningful way in Heart Gold Soul Silver, where like they just have better moves, I guess? I don't know, I actually don't remember. Out of all the games on here, it may have actually been the longest since I revisited either of these 2 games. I played Platinum 2 summers ago, and I haven't played Heart Gold Soul Silver in at least like 6 or 7 years. Heart Gold Soul Silver introduced the Poké Walker, which was a really good meme for a little while. For a while, me and Zach would we would use the Poké Walker on our treadmill and see if we could get items from it or whatever it was. I don't remember what the Poké Walker actually did, but we definitely tried using it. Yeah, I would say I keep Heart Gold Soul Silver right around here. Yeah, this seems pretty fair. I don't think I can put him this high, so this feels pretty good. In fact, I really think Heart Gold Soul Silver should go above Fireleaf Green, so maybe like for now I'll just do this. That's pretty good, I think. And of course, Heart Gold Soul Silver probably have the best post-game of any Pokemon game, where you can explore Kanto again, and it's more fleshed out. You can also get like all the legendaries from Kanto. You can get the birds and Mewtwo and Suicune. Suicune's not from Kanto, but you find him in Kanto. There's just a whole lot of shit going on in that post-game. Also, you can go to the Battle Frontier, but it's like copy-pasted from Platinum, so I don't think a lot of people associate the Battle Frontier with these 2 games. I think the post-game in these games are like it was so good that like it set people's expectations really high. So now like these days when they have bad post-games in Pokemon games, everyone's just like, oof, why can't we have it like the old days where we could explore like an entire second region? That was fun, right? Oh, I forgot to mention, Gen 4 was when they introduced the physical special split, so that it just fixed a lot of things. They're more fun to revisit because, well, okay, maybe not in my case, because like I said, I'm so used to the mechanics in Gen 3, but yeah, I think as far as many people are concerned, I think Gen 4 is fun to revisit because the mechanics just make more sense than the games that came before it. Alright, I think I'm ready to move on from those games. Black and White 1. Okay. So we've been talking about this a lot on the stream, how impressively optimized Black and White are compared to Diamond and Pearl. Like the battle system in Black and White is so quick and snappy, all the animations are quick. Everything in Black and White is just quicker than Gen 4, and it's just more enjoyable in that way. But of course, Black and White did the thing where you can only use new Pokemon, and so I think a lot of people were kind of dissuaded by that. Dissuaded. I don't know if that's the word. I think a lot of people were turned off by that, but I liked it because it forces you to use new Pokemon, whereas you know, before, like, I used Crobat in like almost every other playthrough, so being forced to not use Crobat, you know, it's just interesting to use new things. Although I will say, Black and White, like, revisiting it is kind of weird, because early game, you not only do you not have a lot of options early on, but like they're not very good options. It's like if you want to go for like an interesting mix-up, you use Munna, because she's available pretty early, but she's so bad. So there's that. Speaking of the Pokemon, people were really down on the Pokemon designs in Black and White, and I kind of am too, but not the same ones. Like, people were down on Vanillux and Garbodor. See, I actually like those Pokemon. The ones I don't like are the frickin' fire monkeys. The ones I don't like are the frickin' elemental monkeys. They're so lame looking, and I hate that frickin' that Simipour is like one of your only good options for a water type in the whole game. I think Simipour has like the highest special tag of any water type in the whole game. It's very sad. But otherwise, I think Black and White has some really cool Pokemon. I like Chandelure, I like Golurk. There's plenty of other ones that I'm not thinking of. I like the fossils, I like Serperior a lot. I don't like Emboar, obviously, but that's been talked about a lot on the stream. But yeah, Black and White did a couple new things, and one of those things was that they focused a lot more on the characters. So like, you have two rivals now, Bianca and Sharon, and there's a little more emphasis put on their character arcs, I think. Maybe not compared to like Silver from Heart Gold Soul Silver, but like especially with like N, and I feel like there's just more emphasis put on the story in general in Black and White. And I think you kind of get that because like by the end of the game, you're not actually fighting the Pokemon League, you're fighting Team Plasma, like N and Ghetsis are the final bosses instead of the champion. I think up to this point, Black and White has the best story, so I think that by default leaves them pretty high. N's a really cool character. Obviously I really like Bianca, of course. But yeah, I'm not sure what else I need to say about Black and White. They kinda speak for themselves. As far as revisiting them goes, I think revisiting Black and White is just generally a nicer idea than revisiting Diamond and Pearl, because like I said, they're just so much faster and snappier in like every way. So yeah, this feels pretty good. I'm gonna leave Black and White right here. Okay, now we have Black 2 and White 2. So this was the first time, well, okay, technically not the first sequel, but it was the first time they did a sequel within the same generation. So Black and White 2 are direct sequels to Black and White, and it's the same region, but you have a lot more options available to you as far as Pokemon. So like, you can use the Unova Pokemon, but then there's also old Pokemon you can get. And I think what Black and White 2 did a really good job of is like actually giving you cool Pokemon to use early on, like before, well, not before the first gym, but like in the first part of the game you get like Elekid and Magby and Growlithe and Riolu and Psyduck and Mareep. Just all these Pokemon you don't usually get to use for a whole playthrough from start to finish, you actually have in Black and White 2. That's pretty cool. I will say that generally speaking, I think the story is better in Black and White, but I think Black and White 2 just put a little less emphasis on it, which is fine. Like, Team Plasma isn't like, they aren't as prominent throughout the whole story. They kind of just blow up at the end when you have to deal with them. But aside from that, you don't really deal with them. Black and White 2 introduced Chorus. Black and White 2 introduced Chorus, who's a pretty cool character, and he has a cool theme song. I think most people even hold these games in really high regard. Like, they would put them all the way in S tier, I think, and that might be where I leave them as well, actually. because looking back on it, they're almost like a hybrid between what Black and White tried to do and what the classic games are like, where generally speaking it's just more streamlined. Like, you go from town to town, you fight the gyms, and there's not that much else going on. I think I've commented before that exploring Unova in Black and White 2 kind of feels like exploring Kanto and Heart Gold Soul Silver, where there just isn't that much going on. At least that's what it feels like. But there's still more story emphasis in these games than the other games, I would say. Especially towards the end. I don't think I have anything else to say about Black and White 2. Yeah, if anything, I might put them back down to A tier, but our A tier is getting very bloated, so I don't know. For now, I'll leave them in S tier. That seems fair. Okay, moving on to Gen 6. It feels like we're going through these pretty quick. Now, I think that I like X and Y more than most people. People seem to be really down on X and Y, and I can kind of get why, because, like, I don't know, it is very plain in a lot of ways. It's kind of hard to put into words now that I'm saying it out loud, but, like, it feels like they played it very safe. They introduced Mega Evolution, and that was basically it. That was the big mix-up for the gameplay, and so they decided not to do much else in the single-player campaign. Oh yeah, I should mention, I forgot to mention it at the beginning, but that's mostly what I'm judging, is how fun the single-player campaign is. I don't really play competitive, so yeah. However, I did play competitive the most in Gen 6, by coincidence. But X and Y introduced character customization, which I think is actually a pretty big deal. I think when you're replaying these old games, when you're replaying the newer games, part of the fun is, like, maybe you choose the opposite gender trainer, and you just play with the customization options, and that's just a fun thing to do. At least I enjoy doing it. I don't know if everybody else does too. One thing that X and Y does that's pretty bad is the XP share. So this was the first game to have the XP all key item, and the only reason it was really bad was because if you kept it on, you just got super over leveled. Like, the entire game was pretty trivial if you left it on. So that made them significantly easier than the other games, which is saying something because they're not very hard games, generally speaking. But even still, I kind of want to leave them in B tier. I don't know, I'm really going back and forth between these two. You know what I forgot to say about Gen 5 was that in Gen 5, the sprites are really expressive and they're just fun to look at compared to X and Y, where, like, they finally have 3D models, but for the most part they just stand still. So I think that was actually kind of a downgrade. As far as the story goes, X and Y, it's not great. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't feel like I need to say much else. The rival trainer was very forgettable. Sycamore would have been a cool champion, but whatever. Alright, I really don't have much to say about X and Y, so I'm gonna move on. We got Warras. So once again, I am not as hard on these games as everybody else. I think a lot of people see these games as being, like, inferior remakes compared to Emerald, because actually, why do they say that? So there is just the fact that, like, in Emerald, you fight both Team Aqua and Team Magma, and you catch Rayquaza in the end, which is just more interesting than what happens in Ruby and Sapphire. Oh, you know what it might be? It might be because Warras doesn't have the Battle Frontier. That's probably part of it. But as someone who really likes Gen 3, when I first started playing Warras, I was actually super into it. Like, I was actually thinking these might be, like, my favorite games. Because it was the same as Hoenn before, but, like, there was just some new remixes on the gameplay that I liked. Like the new mechanics, obviously, so getting to use the physical special split in Gen 3, that was new. The Dex Nav lets you catch Pokemon that have interesting moves and abilities, so, like, I got to play through the main game with a Machop that knew Thunder Punch, and that was just kind of cool. But I think where it kind of comes up short is like kind of in the same way that X and Y does. They're just really easy. Like they give you a free Latios or Latios halfway through the game, and it's like, why? It was already a pretty easy game. I don't need this. And you also, like, you can Mega Evolve your starter, which you weren't able to do in X and Y. The X and Y starters don't have Mega Evolutions, but the ones in ORAS do. So, like, if you actually take advantage of Mega Evolution, then the games are pretty trivial. And the only thing keeping you from doing that is the fact that the Mega Evolution animation takes so long. So, yeah. I get where people are coming from, saying that ORAS are kind of lame, so I think I will leave them in B tier, although I kind of want to put them down to C tier. I think that's it for Gen 6. I'm realizing that with each of these games, you know, there's more things I could talk about, but I'm trying to make the game, I'm trying to make the video kind of succinct, so I'm not going to talk too much about each individual game. I'm going to try not to anyway. Okay, Gen 7. So we'll start with Moon and Sun, in that order. So, when Sun and Moon came out, they basically addressed a lot of the concerns and hopes I had for the series directly. So, like, going from Gen 5 to Gen 6, you had, you know, less emphasis on the story and the characters. There were more characters in X and Y, but they just weren't as interesting. In Sun and Moon, you get Lily and Hao and Gladian, and the villains, Guzma and Luzamine. They're just all very interesting characters. They're probably all individually more interesting than, like, any of the characters from the previous games, with the exception of, like, maybe N in Black and White. So in terms of characters and stories, Sun and Moon goes pretty high, and that's something I value a lot in RPGs, so I'm going to value that a lot. That's why I have Black and White so high. Otherwise, I like the idea behind the island trials. So this was the first time they, like, really tried to shake up the formula, where you're not even getting gym badges anymore, you're doing the trials instead. And I really liked it, honestly. This was a time where I was, like, really wanting a change of pace for the series, and Sun and Moon basically tried to do that exactly. So yeah, Sun and Moon resonated with me a lot. I don't know. So with Sun and Moon in particular, I actually just finished, like today, a replay of Sun. So I had already played Moon and Ultra Moon, but I hadn't played Sun yet. So I went back and played Sun these past couple weeks, and this time I actually left the XP share on, because I hadn't done that before. And what I found was that the game was just so much easier than I remembered it being. Like, a lot of the fights that I remembered being kind of hard were very trivial. Like, basically all of the, what are they called? The totem Pokemon. All those fights were trivial. So that's unfortunate. In that way, replaying Sun and Moon kind of feel like busy work. But, I'm not considering difficulty too much when I do these. And plus, if I were to revisit any of these games, you know, there's always the option to put on Nuzlocke rules. So I think I'm actually going to keep Sun and Moon in A tier. I think I've already kind of explained myself pretty well. Yeah, you know what I will say though? I used to be kind of down on, like, the first half of the game. The stakes are just so low. Like, for all of Akala Island, there are literally no stakes. The only antagonists are Team Skull, and they make it a point to tell you that they're just not at all threatening. But in my most recent playthrough, I kind of just got over it. You know, that's kind of just the vibe for the game, is that you're just doing your island trials for shits and giggles, and so for that part of the game it makes sense that there are no stakes at all. And plus, Akala Island, you can get through it pretty quick, regardless, so yeah. There are plenty of other things I could talk about with Sun and Moon. I think the Ultra Beasts were a really cool idea, although I feel like they were kind of a missed opportunity. In Sun and Moon, they tried to do boss Pokemon for the first time with the totems, and I thought that's what they were going to do with the Ultra Beasts. I thought the Ultra Beasts were just going to be single-player boss fights, and you couldn't use them because they're not Pokemon. But in the post-game, you can use them, so whatever. But regardless, I really like the idea behind the Ultra Beasts. I like how they're decidedly different from the other Pokemon designs. How they're either like weirdly humanoid or maybe unsettling or whatever. Guzzlord has its lore where like it ate an entire world and then came to Alola. Yeah, there's plenty more I could talk about, but I think I'll leave it there. I'm not gonna lie, talking for this long is exhausting. I guess it doesn't help that I just ate, so I'm kinda a little bloated. But we've got Ultra Moon and Ultra Sun. Don't worry, they won't stay down here. So Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, they're not sequels, they're basically just remixes of Sun and Moon. So they're very similar games, but there's differences in like the totem Pokemon, and there's differences in the difficulty. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are considerably harder, I think. If you just compare like the boss fights between the two games, then like clearly Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon has like higher levels, and the totem Pokemon actually use items, so like you can't just meme Como-O immediately and kill it with Moonblast. Like it actually has a barrier that prevents you from doing that. The main thing with Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon that people don't like is the fact that the story kind of gets derailed toward the end, where suddenly it's not really about Lusamine and Lily and Gladion, and it's more about Necrozma, and how it was like, oh, secretly Lusamine was actually a good guy who was trying to stop Necrozma. I can get why people didn't like that. Going back to Sun and Moon, I forgot to mention, like, I can actually get why some people don't like Sun and Moon for the story, because, like, you have this story about Lusamine and her weird abusive relationship with her kids. Like, it's not exactly the kind of story you'd be looking for in a Pokemon game, but I was fine with it, so that's why I have it so high. But yeah, going back to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, they do kind of ruin that part of the story, but if you're just looking to revisit Sun and Moon, like, I don't think it's a big deal. Like, you've already experienced the story in Sun and Moon. You know what it's all about for the most part. In terms of, like, revisiting these games, the story is better in Sun and Moon, but, like, I think Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon has enough new features to kind of trump that. So, like, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are more difficult. You can get new Pokemon in them. There's new move tutors. Yeah, I think I'm actually going to leave them all in the same tier. Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon also had the Rainbow Rocket episode, which was neat. We got a bunch of new music for the old team leaders, which was cool. But yeah, I don't have much else to say about them besides that, so I'm going to move on. Technically still in Gen 7, we have Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu. So, I think it really depends on who you ask. Some people are super down on these games, and I can kind of get why. They're a hybrid with Pokemon Go, which is a mobile game, and you typically don't want your favorite, game series to become more like mobile games. But that's not really how I look at them. I basically just look at them as being like Kanto, but with modern mechanics, but missing some modern mechanics, like abilities and held items. It's like you get to play Kanto, but now you can give all your Pokemon really dumb movesets, because all the TMs are really good. So if you look at it that way, I think they're fine. They're pretty inoffensive, honestly. I think this is a pretty good spot for them. Now that I've played it once, I really don't feel the need to go back to them. The main gimmick with them is that you have a new partner Pokemon, and Pikachu or Eevee, they're both just ridiculously strong, and they get, like, unique moves that make them really busted. I've only played them once. I played Let's Go Pikachu, and I just chose not to use Pikachu, so that's kind of affecting how I look at these games. But yeah, they're pretty inoffensive. I think if you're just looking for, like, a way to revisit Kanto where it isn't the exact same thing it always is, Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu are kind of good remixes. I think Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu also like fill in some holes with the storyline with Johto. Is that right? That sounds like a thing, but I don't remember for sure. One thing people were talking about with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was that it was kind of handholdy and not in the way Sun and Moon is, but like they would literally tell you like you can't fight Brock until you've caught a grass type, like that kind of thing. And people were pretty down on that, understandably, but yeah, I would say that's actually one thing I really don't like about them. But it's not that bad. Having to catch so many Pokemon is kind of a drag though, so I would maybe be less likely to revisit them because you have to catch so many Pokemon just to get through the game. Okay, finally we have Sword and Shield. So, there's a lot going on here. You know, Sun and Moon, they changed how you kind of just go about the single player campaign where you're not doing gyms anymore, you're doing island trials, but I think even considering that Sword and Shield were like the biggest mix-ups in the series, because it just feels like a different game in a lot of ways. So in Sword and Shield you don't have routes and dungeons where you spend like a significant amount of time in them and you fight a bunch of trainers and you collect items. Like you just don't have as much of that in Sword and Shield. You spend much more time in the towns doing the gym challenges. And you basically never need to grind for any reason because the XP share will always keep you up to date. But even still, for some reason the wild Pokemon are always like at about your level, which is interesting because if you want to try a new Pokemon you can just do it. So I kind of like Sword and Shield for that reason. I said earlier I really value story and characters, and I would say Sword and Shield have pretty good characters between Hop and Zonia and Leon. One place where it falls flat really hard is the villains. They really could have elaborated more on what the hell Rose was supposed to be doing. So, yeah, as far as the villains go, Sword and Shield is pretty weak. I like the big... Oh yeah, this video's gonna have spoilers for Sword and Shield, by the way. I like the big finale where it's you fight Eternatus with Hop. That was pretty cool. I kind of like them right here, actually, in B tier. I've only played Shield once, and I haven't played Sword yet, so this is probably going to change. Sword and Shield, it just feels like they took the fun parts of Pokemon and tried to really emphasize on those parts. So, like, the gym battles are a huge part of the game. They're really exciting, and you get to Dynamax your Pokemon, mixed for some memorable moments, I guess. The Pokemon League is actually a tournament, which is what I've wanted forever. It's pretty cool. They took out Mega Evolution, which is fine with me. I would say, like, so yeah, these like new mechanics were like in Gen 6 they tried Mega Evolution, in Gen 7 they tried Z moves, which I forgot to mention completely. And then in Gen 8 they tried Dynamaxing. I think Dynamaxing is my favorite between those three, because you can't trivialize the entire game with Dynamaxing, because you can only use them in gym and boss fights. And your opponent can use them too, so that basically forces it to be more fair than how it used to be. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this. I might even move up Sword and Shield a little bit. I will say the post-game in Sword and Shield is very lacking, so if you were playing it during like the initial hype train, then you got to play a lot of max raid battles and stuff like that with people. And it was fun, but I don't know if that will always be a thing. Like 5 years from now, if you want to revisit Sword and Shield, I don't know if that'll be as fun. And as far as post-game content, you have like that little campaign where you catch the dog, and there's a battle tower, which is an immensely disappointing end game battle facility. It's really short and not hard at all. So yeah. So that is where we've landed with this tier list. Now we have some tiers that are very bloated, so I'm actually gonna move things around for a minute. Okay, I guess I'm done already. I didn't actually move that much. I basically just moved Let's Go down to D tier, which feels right, I think. But yeah, I guess I didn't say it so, but I am ranking them like from left to right, so I think I might actually move up X and Y for that reason. But yeah, this feels pretty good. So I think the A tier looks more bloated than it actually is, because like these 4 games are all the same. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this. There was something I wanted to say. Oh right, so if I was gonna go with like literally just how likely I am to revisit them and not look at how fun they are individually, kind of in a vacuum, then like these would go down here. Diamond and Pearl would go down there, Ruby and Sapphire would come down here. Because really, unless I'm doing a Nuzlocke, I'm not going to play either of these two. I'm going to play Emerald instead. These are all roughly equal, I think. But yeah. So I guess there's 2 versions of this tier list. One where I'm looking at them kind of in a vacuum, and one where I'm considering the superior version. But yeah, I think that's it for this video. Hopefully I didn't ramble on for too long. Maybe eventually we'll revisit this during the stream and we'll move things around. I don't know. Thanks for watching. Bye. So I'm actually recording this after the fact. I've edited the first draft of this video, and just while I was watching it I noticed there were a handful of key things I probably should have mentioned. Now I know I said, you know, I'm not going to spend too much time on every game. I don't have to talk about every little thing in every game, but there were some pretty significant things that I thought were worth mentioning. And first of all, I want to bump up Yellow. Just because, you know, I talked a lot about replay value, and I just think Yellow offers a slightly different experience, which makes it more worthwhile. You get to use Pikachu, which is neat, but you can use all the starters as well. I know you can do that in Let's Go, but yeah, in Yellow, I just remember the gym leaders having really weird Pokemon, and like they are higher level too. In the rival battle in the end, he just has different Pokemon, so it's just, on the whole, a different, slightly different experience. I know it doesn't sound like that much of a difference, but when you play these games so much, little changes like that do make a difference. So I think Yellow deserves a bump for that reason. If Gen 1 was more mechanically sound, I would maybe put it up, but whatever. Now, I wanted to elaborate a little bit on Sun and Moon versus Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So basically, I just want to make it perfectly clear, like, in terms of just how good the games are by themselves, I think Sun and Moon are better, because the story is just significantly better, and that's what I value in RPGs, so there. But if I were to tier this just based on, like, how fun they are to revisit, then it would probably look more like this. I would put Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, like, significantly higher, because I think compared to these 2 games, revisiting either of these 2 is kind of a drag. That's just how I feel. I'm kind of jumping around here, but Oras had the Delta episode, which I thought was worth mentioning, because people seem to like the Delta episode, which I thought was interesting, maybe because the Zinnia fight was cool, or maybe just because you got to actually catch Rayquaza like you could in Emerald, and you could finally catch Deoxys legitimately in the main series games for the first time. So for those reasons, I do think the Delta episode is cool, but so 2 problems. One, just in practice, it's just a chore to play it. You end up just flying all over the place. You like watch a cutscene or you do a battle, you fly somewhere else, rinse and repeat. It's just kind of a drag to actually play it, although there are some cool moments in it. But perhaps the bigger issue is just that, like, the timeline explanations that we didn't ask for, like, I just didn't like how they handled all that. So in the Delta episode, you're like saving an alternate timeline where they don't have Mega Evolution or something, and it's just nobody asked them to complicate the story like that. So yeah, that was just kind of how I felt on it. So for that reason, I'm not moving Oris, despite the Delta episode having some cool things in it. Now, for both Black and White and Black and White 2, I forgot to talk about the post-game, and I think going from Gen 4, they did a pretty decent job with the post-games. So in Black and White, you essentially just explore the rest of the region, so like the entire east side of Unova. So there's actually quite a bit to do in the post-game. There are some really cool boss fights in the post-game where you can fight like Cynthia or developers, I guess, like the Game Freak NPCs. But Black and White 2, you have like the entire Pokemon World Tournament where you can fight like all the previous gym leaders and champions, and they have new teams and new sprites, and it's just a lot of effort they went through just to essentially just put in fan service, which is fine. That's great. So yeah, I think that's just another reason to keep Black and White 2 up here, because it has replay value. You know, like I could go back to my file of Black 2 where I've done basically everything, and I would still have shit left over to do because I never touched the Pokemon World Tournament. And since I said I was doing left to right tiering, I'm gonna make some significant changes here. I think that's pretty good. Okay. So I know we have this big gap between Diamond and Pearl and Platinum, and I was thinking more about it, and it's funny because when I first played Gen 4, I played Diamond and Pearl like 3 or 4 times before Platinum even came out. And by the time Platinum came out, I was actually burnt out on the games, and so it took me forever to actually finish Platinum, which is just weird to think about, because like, I had the patience to play Diamond and Pearl a bunch of times, but not Platinum. It is kind of weird. So that makes me think that maybe Diamond and Pearl's issues aren't actually that bad, and I'm kind of exaggerating them a little bit in my head. But once again, you gotta remember, we're trying to use this whole spectrum. So like, even if there isn't that much of a difference in quality, like it's still enough for me to put it toward the bottom. And that kind of brings me to one other thing I wanted to mention, which was that Platinum, one of the main things it added was the Torn World, which was just a cool area to explore. You got to fight Cyrus and Giratina. It was just a cool thing that they added. It's too bad Cynthia doesn't help at all while you're in there. She's just kind of hanging out. Finally, there's a couple of things I can mention with Sword and Shield. So, I said in the video, I'm mostly focusing on the single-player campaigns, but I feel like I gotta mention the Dexit. So, in Sword and Shield, they only have data in the game for like 430 Pokemon, which is roughly half of all of them. So, but the thing is, it doesn't really affect the single-player campaign at all, because in the previous games, like, that's basically what you were working with anyway. X and Y, the Kalos Dex was 450 Pokemon, and those were just all the ones you got to use in the main game. Sword and Shield is basically the same way. It's just that all the other Pokemon that aren't in the main game are just not even programmed in the game. And so that does mean you have less things to run into in like the battle facilities in the post game, but I just don't think it's that big a deal. That was always my take on Dexit. And then there's everything else having to do with Sword and Shield, where like people didn't like the pop-ins, or they thought the animations were lacking, and just all that stuff I don't care about that much. I think Sword and Shield are actually really good looking games. The towns all look really distinct from each other. Some of them actually look like actual towns. Yeah, I think it's actually a really good looking game. Probably the best looking game out of all these. So I'm actually kind of talking myself into putting them up, but I don't think I will. It's very hard to to tier these, especially when you like them all for different reasons. Final thing I wanted to say about Sword and Shield is that they made competitive Pokemon even more accessible. So you can fix your Pokemon's IVs, you can change their natures, which is really cool. You can get the XP candies to just grind them up immediately. There's a lot of quality of life changes in Sword and Shield that I actually really liked. So I think probably about here. I think I may end up putting Sword and Shield further up in the future because, you know, like I said, I really value how fun the single player campaign is, and that really seems like something they prioritized in Sword and Shield because it's streamlined in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think that'll do it for all of our revisions here. Dude, I want to try and fix this at all. Yeah, the A tier is still pretty bloated, so I think I'll leave it though. It's not too bad when you consider that like a lot of these games are just other versions of the S tier games, so whatever.